So the human brain is actually hardwired to get depressed and to have all of the symptoms of clinical depression. So if you have a spouse and 2 kids, and your spouse and 2 kids are out driving in the rain without you, and they get hit head on by a drunk driver and killed, you are going to become clinically depressed within 24 hours, probably sooner. You might have some other emotional reactions prior to that, but as soon as that news really sinks in, you are going to become clinically depressed. That is not due to metabolic dysfunction anywhere. That is due to your brain being hardwired to have that response to horrible, tragic, life-altering news. Your life and your purpose in life have just been devastated. You have just lost some of the most important people to you in your life. You will get depressed. And in fact, I would argue if you don't get depressed, there is something wrong with you. There is really something wrong with you.
Yeah, that's when
if you don't get depressed.
Yeah.
And either you didn't love your kids, and now we're going to think that did you send that drunk driver to hit them or something?
But you could say this for anything that's stressful. So, for example, how about if you're married and your spouse comes home and just says, you know what, I'm just not in love with you anymore. I'm done. That's or a divorce or it's all that.
Absolutely.
Then you can become depressed from that situation. Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. Or a high school student who really wants to go to a good college and they flunk a test, or they get a C on the test when they really needed an A on that test. That person may get depressed because, again, they have wrapped so much into the meaning of that and their purpose in life, and their purpose in life is getting into a good college, and they don't want to be flexible on that. They don't want to adapt. They are committed to, I'm getting into a good college, and then they get this bad grade. That can make someone depressed, like really depressed, for at least a short period of time.
Okay.
And I am arguing that those are normal adaptive reactions, that all humans have those, and that those are not disorders. We should not talk about those as disorders. We should recognize that those things happen. On the other hand, when somebody has chronic, unrelenting depression for no good reason, maybe something bad happened to them, but it was like 3 years ago, and they still haven't gotten over it. And they're still depressed, and they cannot move on with their life. Or the other person who says, I don't know why I'm so depressed. I don't know why I'm so miserable, why I'm thinking about suicide, why I hate my life. I don't understand it. On the surface, objectively, I can see that I have a good life, but I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm so miserable. I can't stop crying. I can't stop ruminating. What I'm arguing is that second person has brain dysfunction. The brain networks that create the experience of depression in all of us, if we experience tragedies or setbacks in life, those same brain networks are now malfunctioning. They are firing when they should not be firing. And what I am arguing is that the only way to understand how and why they would fire erroneously is to understand the metabolism in those cells and in those brain networks. And that once we understand that, we can understand why somebody develops a brain disorder that we might call major depression or major depressive disorder.
And it's interesting because it's an unorthodox view, because, what you would see is if we looked at it this way, then an SSRI may not exist, right?
Well, that's really interesting. So right now, the paradigm that most people are probably familiar with is that depression is due to a chemical imbalance. And that chemical imbalance for depression is usually thought of as serotonin, so the SSRI. So that is a prevailing mindset in the minds of many patients and clinicians, is that people with depression don't have enough serotonin in their brain. And so if we boost their serotonin with an SSRI, that will fix the problem. What I'm arguing is that neurotransmitters can become imbalanced due to metabolic dysfunction. And so we have to be able to answer the question, well, why are the neurotransmitters imbalanced, if they even are? More importantly, with the question of an SSRI in particular, we actually have evidence that SSRIs do impact brain metabolism and more specifically brain mitochondrial function. And so, in fact, their mechanism of action, because they do work for some people, there's no question about it. As a clinical psychiatrist, I have seen them work in people. I know they work for some people. They don't work for everyone. But when they do work, we have evidence that they are actually increasing brain metabolism, or more specifically, they are improving mitochondrial function in brain cells. And that, in fact, is probably its primary mechanism of action. It's really not about the serotonin or a serotonin imbalance per se. It's probably more about the effects on brain metabolism. So the bottom line is SSRIs do work for depression for some people, but they fail to work for other people. And although a lot of people think that the mechanism of action is related to this serotonin imbalance, meaning that depression must be caused by low levels of serotonin, we actually have a tremendous amount of neuroscience research suggesting that that is actually not at all true or accurate. Researchers can actually measure the levels of serotonin in the brain, and they have consistently not been found to be imbalanced in the brains of people with clinical depression. And yet SSRIs do work. And that is what has driven the hypothesis that because this medication that increases serotonin levels in the synapse works for depression, then the cause must be low levels of serotonin. But in fact, we have additional research that actually combines that clinical research and a lot of people's real world experience of SSRIs help me with my depression or anxiety or OCD, with my theory, the brain energy theory. And that is that serotonin is known to play a role in something called mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning it stimulates the production of more mitochondria in your cells, which improves brain metabolism. And in fact, that, I would argue, is probably the real mechanism of action of SSRIs, is that they are improving brain metabolism when they work in people. But there are many causes of abnormal brain metabolism, and serotonin may not be enough to overcome some of those other causes.